Tonight is called Finding the Right Hills to Die On. It'll be over the topic of theological triage. It's going to be a fairly simple topic. It's not super hard to understand. We're not going to be doing any gymnastics. And while there are a few verses that we are using to justify theological triage and the wisdom behind it, the topic itself doesn't have a ton of scripture in it, so it's pretty unbeliever friendly on our scripture side. So my resource is Gavin Ortlund's book, Finding the Right Hills to Die On. I got all of my information from there. So getting into it. Tonight we will be first discussing the problem that we're solving, and then we'll be talking about what the solution to it is. And then we'll be discussing how we actually use the triage system. And finally, all of you will be practicing with me. We're going to be spending quite a few minutes doing that. So look forward to the practical aspect of that. So we have this situation when lives are on the line. We have to know which issues we're starting with. We can't be focusing on a broken arm while the person is bleeding out. And I know this seems, we don't deal with lives online, but we do. We deal with everybody's spiritual lives on the line every day as we have gospel conversations with them. So we have to view our doctrinal issues in this triage manner. We need to focus on the most detrimental issues before we can start looking at less urgent needs. And there are a couple of two opposite points of view that all of us have a tendency to lean towards, one or the other, that can prevent us from doing that effectively. The first is the dogmatic point of view. This is the point of view that holds all doctrines as essential. This can cause unnecessary division of the church, and unity in the church is essential to its mission to spread the gospel. When we're not unified or we're too dogmatic, it can hurt our gospel witness to others and make it harder to partner with other churches and effectively reach our mission as Christians. Our second point of view, which is the opposite, is the minimalist point of view. This is where doctrine doesn't really matter. We just want to love Jesus and feed the poor. However, loving Jesus requires defining Jesus, which leads to doctrine, which leads to unavoidable division, and those non-essential issues that they push off actually impact how we uphold the gospel. And we also have to ask the question, essential for what? Because non-essential for salvation doesn't mean unimportant for church practice or the Christian life from day to day. So we need to find a balance. We need to prioritize the essentials while still recognizing that other doctrines are still important. And the triage system can help us do that. So to speak, it can help us figure out which hills we need to be dying on. And I know you might be thinking, wait, aren't all doctrines equal? Why are we ranking them? They're all important, doesn't matter. Well, we have a couple examples here. In Titus 3:9, it says, "But avoid foolish controversies and genealogies and strife and disputes about the law, for they are useless and worthless." So apparently there are some controversies over these issues that are considered unprofitable for us. And then we have Paul in 1 Corinthians 15:3 saying, "For I handed down to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures." Paul's use of first importance there indicates that this matter is more important than the other matters that the Corinthians were arguing about that he was writing to them for. We also see quite a few points of wisdom in using the triage system. It helps us achieve unity in the church by avoiding unnecessary divisions. It helps us advance the gospel by making us more graceful in gospel conversations, but firm on the gospel itself. And it helps us navigate differences of conviction. We all have to live with other people who hold different convictions than us, and it helps us decide how ministries can partner together. Finally, it can help us decide which doctrines to die for, such as Daniel facing the lion's den by refusing to pray to God, or the early Christians refusing to worship or sacrifice to the Roman emperor. So, quick overview of how we're going to triage. We have first-rank issues, which are essential to the gospel, second-rank issues, which are urgent for the church, third-rank issues, which are important to theology, and fourth rank, which is indifferent or theologically unimportant. Starting with first rank, these are the ones that are essential to the gospel. And some of the criteria that you might consider when looking at a doctrine to place it for this rank is how clear is the Bible on this doctrine? How important is this doctrine to the gospel? What is the historical church's view on this doctrine? What would be this doctrine's effect on the church? And what if I'm wrong? Now, this list isn't exhaustive, and not every first-rank doctrine is going to satisfy all of your criteria. There are things that we might hold as first rank that satisfy 2 or 3 of them, but are still justifiably first rank. I think that Gavin Ortlund makes it clear how he really sees it in this quote from him. Some first-rank doctrines are needed to defend the gospel, and others to proclaim the gospel. Without them, the gospel is either vulnerable or incomplete. So these are the doctrines that are necessary for us as we're having gospel conversations. Next, we have second rank. These issues are urgent for the church. Some of your criteria you might consider are how important is this for the health and practice of the church? Is this practice divisive or controversial? And does it have an impact on church membership or visible function? So these are the things that we divide up into denominations over. Things like communion affect the practical running of the church, so disagreements on these can lead to people compromising their own convictions. We have another quote from Gavin here. First, although second-rank doctrines are not essential to the gospel, they exert a significant influence over our witness to and/or our understanding of the gospel. Second, second-rank issues lead to practical differences in how we do church and/or ministry, such that attempting formal unity amid our different convictions will often lead to divisiveness, confusion, and violations of conscience. So while these things might not be the things that we need to preach the gospel to people or spread it, and they might not be what we need to defend it, they are important to how the daily Christian life functions, so they're not unimportant, but they are less urgent than our first-rank issues. Next, we have our third-rank issues. These issues are important to our theology, but they aren't the things that Christians should be dividing up over into denominations over. Some of our criteria are how clear is the Bible on this doctrine? What has been the historical stance of the church on this doctrine? And does this doctrine practically affect church function? Being in formal unity is possible even if you have differences of opinions on these doctrines, since they don't typically affect the functional practices of the church, and they don't have effects on our church membership. You also will typically see with a lot of these third-rank doctrines that historical church figures that were in unity with each other held different positions or weren't clear on their positions over these types of doctrines. Here are a couple quotes from Gavin that I think also help us parse this out. In both war and theology, there are battles to avoid. Just as we can be ineffective because of compromise or inertia, so too can we be ineffective because of impulsiveness or haste. Sometimes our urge to argue over these issues with people because we hold these convictions deeply can hinder our gospel conversations with them and make us seem more divisive. We also have the quote, "We should eagerly pursue the kind of theological conviction and strength that is willing not only to fight for the truth, but also to avoid fighting in order to promote the gospel." Sometimes it's really beneficial for us to partner with people to spread the gospel or for ministries to partner together in that mission. However, we can hold these differences and still do that. But if we make these third-rank issues our hills that we are going to die on, that can hinder our partnership with other people. And if you meet someone who maybe has a difference of opinion on this third-rank issue, your trying to convince them of Christianity can be hindered because of this one thing that isn't essential to the gospel. Next, we have our fourth-rank issues. These issues are indifferent or theologically unimportant. Now, I am not saying that you can't have opinions on these or that strong convictions that you hold have to make those higher issues. You can be deeply convicted about these things and they can affect you. However, they don't really affect our theology itself. So this is things like style of music. What kind of instrument are you using in church? Or the number of angels that exist. 100, 1 million, it's not super clear, and practically it doesn't affect our theology. Do we have any questions before we go ahead and move into our practice time? Okay, if there aren't any questions, then I am going to have timers on my phone. I'm going to give you 3 minutes for each doctrine, and there will be a couple that I will stop and talk about after we practice them. However, I'm going to ask you all to turn around to the people next to you and discuss where you're going to rank the doctrine and why. If you're confused, there's a helpful chart that has all of the ranks and criteria in it right there. So first off, we're going to start with baptism.
Do you mean whether it's how it's practiced?
Mostly how it's practiced. Baptism in general. Go with what you think of when I put the word up there.
I don't know. I'm looking to be perfect. Sorry. Like the gospel is grace, resurrection, Jesus Christ, of which baptism is like a history. Not the gospel doesn't. That's one of the things about my head. Yeah, the main thing that's kind of dividing between putting it in 1 and 2 is just the fact that like people ask the questions like, well, what about the person that's like on their way to get baptized and they get hit in the car crash and die? So then like, are they not saved? And like, of course we would say like, no, of course they're saved, like because it's their intention that counts. Practical, like it is a theological, it's also like a practical training. there are definitely distinctions, and I would be tempted to always say number one because also it's just what we see here, and like I believe Acts, like after the point that Jesus ascended, like the main thing that the apostles would do is baptize people. Like I think it was in Acts chapter 8, but like when like comes to one of the apostles and asked to be baptized, and like they're asking like to be Christ faith and baptize them. Like that was a big thing we saw with the apostles too. So I'd say it's pretty important. I'm pretty tired. It's tough between first and second, but I do lean towards first and second.
So I guess I would ask you, tied to two churches, which most closely okay, so if I was to correct you and tell you that I was a Christian differently about that,
Okay, so our 3 minutes for this one is up. And I noticed that when I popped it up on the board, there was a lot of frantic conversation. That's really good. There's also a lot of confusion. I did that on purpose. I'm sorry I tricked you a bit. This is a doctrine that some people are going to consider first rank, and some people are going to consider second rank. I would say typically our split is probably Protestants are typically going to think it's second rank, and our non-Protestants will probably hold it as first rank. That's okay. Us practicing the triage system is mainly for you to decide where these doctrines fall in your triage system. There's also different elements of the baptism doctrine that are separate doctrines, and lumping it all together under one word makes it really confusing. Baptismal regeneration is separate from who the proper subjects of baptism are. You might hold one of those as a first-rank doctrine or a second-rank doctrine, and the other one as a second or third-rank doctrine, and that's okay. So this was mainly an example that you're probably not going to agree in discussing this. It's good to hear other people's thoughts. This is an exercise for you. And when I pop it up on the board, there might be some of these that are more complex than just the word. Next, we'll have the resurrection. Go.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, there are people that think that he can rise from the dead, and they're yeah.
yeah, I definitely
No, why would you? Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. You just have multiple yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. No, I totally agree. Because I mean, like not only is the foundation, but it's like one of the parts that like makes us strong as a Christian. We have like the most evidence for it. So when we have like 15 people taking that to the grave, we really think that. Well, because Muslims believe that Jesus. Oh, isn't it that like Jesus like died and didn't rise? Okay, gotcha.
sorry, I've heard Muslims say that they believe that he was martyred,
So y'all believe that? Okay, so y'all believe that he resurrected? No.
so like someone was crucified in his place, or possibly for like
Not necessarily dead people, spiritual beings. No, like the thing is like he died.
like it? Okay.
How are those reconciled?
Okay, our 3 minutes for that one are up. The resurrection is probably one that a lot people had a lot more agreement on than the first one I popped up, and it also tends to be one of our simpler ones. So we'll go ahead and move on to our next one, which is spiritual gifts. Go, have fun.
And they believe that, like, at the point of, like, the descendants of the Holy Spirit in Acts chapter 2 that Jesus did, that those were, like, training them throughout generations instead of just the guy disagreed with it. Which is why I put him, like, a third grade. Because, like, it's still a fourth piece, but, like, it's not, like, delivering the doctrine.
That's why it's like it's but some people might
So, I'm sorry, but I'm not. In my church, I mostly concern myself with ones that I believe out.
well, but it's reasonable.
They're also like the church that like keeping people influenced and receive certain like actually that's like one time they do that is like shut the doors. We're not leaving until we have $10,000 crazy. Yeah. That's why I have this Oh no, yes, of course. Yeah, no, I personally think, yeah, exactly. Like, I think God created us on purpose, and I believe that the Spirit is exactly. It's not, yeah, it's not essential because we can't measure how what
Okay, that's our 3 minutes for this one. This is another one of those doctrines where there are varying degrees of continuationism and cessationism. You might be a continuationist full throttle. You might be a cessationist full throttle, but you also might be someone who... Yes, so continuationism is the doctrine that spiritual gifts like speaking in tongues, prophesying, all the spiritual gifts have continued through to today and are still active. Cessationism is the doctrine that these gifts have ceased to exist after the apostles died. So there are varying degrees of cessationism, though. You might meet people who are cessationist for a couple of gifts, and maybe they're cessationist in certain capacities, but the gifts you're talking about, the capacity that these viewpoints are held are different. And you see the same thing with continuationism. Specifically with a lot of Pentecostal churches, you might see that they think that spiritual gifts are necessary, and if you don't exhibit these spiritual gifts, you're not a Christian. So we have varying degrees, And you might see that people hold these in a lot of different places. Our next one is the creation days. Go.
Because they didn't even concern themselves with that really, like whether it was one literal day or a thousand months. They're just like, it's not meant to be taken literally in some sort of way. Yeah. It's not a scientific account of creation. Yeah. What do y'all think about creation?
I personally hold to I don't know what the name of the doctrine is. I'm not sure what that means. I don't know contact with whether or not like something like active.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not entirely sure what I mean. I completely overall, yeah, like God guided us. I think it's
Yeah.
beautiful tapestry of God's art.
Yeah, it was the biggest misconception, like science doesn't care, science points out. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. I understand. Yeah, no, it takes a lot of convincing. I mean, it didn't come up as a theory until like the late 1800s, early 1900s, right? And there's still so much we don't know.
It does make some realization that while I think evidence there's arguments on that.
Exactly. That's why it's no. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, a lot of them is just propaganda. A lot of it. Yeah.
Okay, that was our 3 minutes for this one. I do want to clarify that the creation days is not the same doctrine as creation ex nihilo or the creation out of nothing. So creation out of nothing by God is separate from the creation days specifically. And you'll typically find Christians who hold lots of different positions on this. But in the South, especially in the Bible Belt, you might hear a lot of only the specific 7-day creation being held, and it might get promoted to first rank a lot, though that's not necessary for you to hold it as first rank just because other people do. So our next one will be the Trinity. What?
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
I think that's the I personally
Okay, that was our 3 minutes for the Trinity. By the way, I think we have time, so if any of these, I think we've got 3 more. If any of these last 3, when I cut y'all off, enough of y'all are like, wait, we want a little bit more time, I'll give y'all an extra minute or 2 if you want it. So our next one will be complementarianism versus egalitarianism. I'll go ahead and say what those are in case some of you are confused. Complementarianism is the position that men and women are equal in importance and value, but hold different positions within the church and family life, while egalitarianism holds a view that they are strictly equal, so men and women can all hold office in church, they can all function as ministers, and different things like that. Go ahead and start your 3 minutes.
No, okay. I think it's really cool. I mean, it's understandable that the difference between men and women, which I think is like, there's a big thing that Paul talks about a lot in like Ephesians chapter 4, and 1 Corinthians. I think, yeah, 1 Corinthians chapter 11. Just talking about like the husband and wife and their dynamic and stuff. And then like also just like whether or not they can hold off on and that kind of stuff. Like, okay, two or I guess that was I wouldn't say it's yeah. I don't think it's full. I was a little quick. I would agree.
Whoever she herself.
I understand the arguments for
You just don't get it.
the one that I didn't really go to but none of it seems to be,
So I guess it's
none of the arguments for either or seem to be predicated on any sort of like, I don't like
Right.
the only way that you would argue that it's like a necessary thing is that sacraments from someone like if you are complementarian, sacraments from a are invalid, that would be a way for the argument that complementarianism is like essential.
Right.
But you know, then wouldn't get to
Because they wouldn't have sacraments. Right.
so
Yes.
but like that's like very
So yeah, no,
but I can see that
you make a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah.
And then you also see Paul obviously Paul is somewhat that women can't teach because he explicitly phrases female she's not a pastor, she's not the leader of a church, but she is evangelizing. So Paul believes in some form of teaching. And so there's Christians who have interpretations. Obviously that verse is so that could be all kinds of things. I don't, yeah, I feel like the Bible is not clear enough for it to be but I definitely think it's brought up.
Yeah. Yeah. I watched this.
Like it's not going to tell you the word.
Like why it's also wrong. Because I don't need to because no one.
Okay, that was our 3 minutes. Are there people who want more time to talk about this one? Or are we good? Y'all want more time? Okay, I'll give you another minute. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the conversation there. So this is one that you'll find where some of the other doctrines weren't quite as intertwined, but this one is very intertwined with church function. So this really exemplifies that practical aspect I was talking about. This a lot of times dictates who can do teaching within churches. So a complementarian who's very set on their complementarianism would have a harder time attending an egalitarian church, and vice versa, because of that limitation on who might be teaching. Our next issue will be the millennium. So this is okay. So the millennium, there are a few different views. This is typically tied into the tribulation. The millennium itself is the idea that there will be a millennium of Jesus' reign on earth. But you also have the position of amillennialism, different ones. And I will go ahead and let y'all start your 3 minutes.
It does. Yes. You think it's second? It does come up a lot, but also like you have Jesus prophesying the second coming, like nobody's gonna know it here now, right? So like I agree. I would agree. I would put it at
Okay, that was 3 minutes. Is there anyone who wants more clarification on some of the different options or wants more time to talk about it? Yes, we can have more time. I'll give you a couple more minutes.
yes, post is where like Jesus' second coming is gonna happen sometime in the future. Yeah. Exactly. like, no, I mean, you say it's actually October. I'm like, bro.
One of my favorite which will happen first. And then it's like GTA 6 releases.
Oh,
Jesus came back.
betting on Jesus' resurrection.
It's like the odds are so heavily in favor of it. But like if Jesus does come back, that's a lie.
Yeah, exactly. That's hilarious.
So funny.
That's so funny. Oh, listen, Christ returns for little thousand years. If you hold the whole series, Christ returns. Post Christ returns after the yeah. I am okay, so postmillennialism is like we are currently, which this has something to do with like we're paving the way. Yeah, sort of. Yeah, because that's like the one side of it. Amillennialism is that there's no end, and that not be symbolic. Christ is currently reigning now.
Okay, I think that's probably all the time we have for that one. I do want to quickly clarify, because I think there might have been some confusion. The millennium is specifically the 1,000-year reign, not Jesus' second coming. Jesus' second coming is a separate doctrinal issue from when and how or if the physical 1,000-year reign is going to happen, which is the millennium. Our final issue that we're going to discuss is the virgin birth. I will let y'all go ahead and get started.
Something that doesn't happen, right? You know, it adds to this division. I would say so because you have the Holy Spirit, like there's the passage that in Luke chapter, I think it was 1 or 2, that comes to Mary in chapter 2. That's right. Yeah, like where like the Holy Spirit comes to Mary and asks like Mary is like okay with bearing Christ like on her own, right? And I think it just shows like a triumph over like Eve's sin, and then like kind of the power of Mary. I guess righting those wrongs. I think it's very beautiful, but it's also very practical. It kind of adds to Jesus' divinity, obviously. If he was the Savior and he was still born from like a man and a woman, like he'd still be the Savior, right? But just like the fact that he is born from a virgin birth, just something that's like out of the ordinary, it just kind of adds to like his divinity. Well, there had to be a star.
So the virgin birth is not yeah.
Right.
Virgin birth is I was going to say the opposite. So virgin birth isn't Jesus can divine the virgin birth. So like and this is mainly yes. So essentially the Roman Catholics it was primarily under that out of sin the rest of it in some aspect of sin itself or exactly. And so the idea of virgin birth is that Mary was given redemptive grace before immaculate conception. She was given redemptive grace before she had Jesus. So she was a pure vessel. And if like Joseph had laid with her, if he was like a pious man, he would have introduced this to Adam. And so therefore Jesus like a perfect divine being could have been born from sin. And so this idea that the virgin birth, much in the same way the ark had to be like perfect and pure in order to hold the essence of God, Mary, you are
Is there anyone who wants more time on this issue? Okay, we'll get some more time. This is the last one.
Yeah, so she was sinless. She was saved. She was still saved by grace, but she was saved from God. The role of
Yeah, like another reason why I was verses like also back to like, Jesus was very first his mother's death. I mean obviously his mother was present in all the pivotal moments of his right? And so just like, to like just not really care about like I get the first birth of Mary. I just think it shows like it's been alive to me. It's very unique. Again, it's not something that like I would say is completeness but it's just more of a respect. Following the same only makes sense if Jesus is born who's the new king. No, and that's I don't think that's like a that makes an argument.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end our discussion of this doctrine. And I'll ask again before we wrap up, are there any just general questions about triage or maybe any of the things that we talked about earlier? No? Okay, cool. We'll move on to my final takeaways. These are, 1, we can't be too dogmatic or too minimalistic about doctrine. We have to be able to find that balance. 2, we have to pick the right hills to die on. These might look different for each of us, but you can't be running around dying on every hill or dying on absolutely no hills. And 3, theological triage can help us pick which hills we want to die on. Again, my reference was Finding the Right Hills to Die On, The Case for Theological Triage by Gavin Ortlund. And I think we have some announcements to close out.